I'm a guy who lives in Brooklyn in New York City, in a neighborhood known as Bensonhurst, which is only about an hour away from Manhattan by train and even less by car. It's a fairly safe neighborhood, but it is surrounded by some shady areas like Borough Park to the north and Gravesend to the southeast. And my neighborhood itself has had its days of violence here and there. Even though, hilariously enough, it's also bordered by Diker Heights to the west, which is known as the safest neighborhood in Brooklyn. Anyway, I'm a native New Yorker born and raised here, and living in this rough city all your life, I ended up growing up with a thick skin and a sharp tongue that would leave most people's self-esteem in ruins, as many other New Yorkers do. This will be relevant later, as growing up in a city such as this leaves you not being scared easily. These experiences, however, were the exception. I have no photographs or anything to serve as proof, as I am talking about my past experience, but I swear on every fiber of my being that everything I am about to talk about is 100% true. This first story happened in 2005, when I was about 11 to 12 years old. I was at home playing GTA San Andreas, like basically every teenager at that time. One of the best games ever, by the way. In the living room of the apartment I lived in with my mom and sister, since I don't come from a rich family. This is important because the door to the apartment was to the immediate left of my bed at the time. While playing the game, my mom, who was cooking in the kitchen to my right, and myself heard some weird banging and scraping noises in the hallway outside the apartment. Curious as to what was going on, my mom decided to check out what was happening through the peephole of our door. I would later hear some loud, angry yelling, and then immediately somebody running down the stairs and out of the building. A few hours later, we get a knock at the door. It's my Mexican neighbor from across the hall from us, and she was crying and shaking, with cops talking to somebody behind her. My mom lets her in so she could calm down, and I even stopped playing my game because I genuinely felt bad for her. She had this look of terror that was almost contagious. Eventually, after a few hours, she thanked us and went back into her apartment. My mom told me that what happened was that she saw some guy trying to break into our neighbor's door, but then was scared away by a Spanish lady, which turned out to be my neighbor's mother. However, this is not where the story ends. The next day, after coming home from school, I was just about to put the key in my door to open it, when I happened to look back at my neighbor's door. I saw something on her door, and when I stepped over to see what it was, all cliches aside, my heart stopped. The fucking guy scratched a phrase saying, "I will get you," into her door. Needless to say, she and her mom moved out about a week later. As far as I know, the guy was never caught. This second story happened between the late winter and spring of 2012. My apartment building had recently been purchased by a new landlord and was undergoing a much-needed renovation, since it was an old building that was built sometime in the 1920s. This is relevant due to the fact that the construction workers would sometimes, foolishly, leave the front door of the building wide open with the lock removed, which allowed trespassers to waltz right in. I, again, was home, now 18 years old, in college, snowed in the middle of winter. I was watching episodes of The Daily Show with Jon Stewart on Hulu, on my bed in the same living room, when I hear the sound of keys jingling near the door, and the sound of a key going through the lock. Thinking it was my mom who was coming home from work, I thought nothing of it. Until the sound persisted. Confused, I called out, "Mom?" Then the sound stopped, but then persisted again. I call out then, "Mom, you need help?" The sound still persisted. Again, the door was to my immediate left from my bed, so I was beginning to get a bit unnerved and suspicious. I very quietly got up from my bed and went to the peephole to see some Asian guy trying to picklock the door. I could almost feel my thyroid swell with adrenaline, and I started thinking fast. While still being admittedly scared shit as well, I hastily went to the kitchen and grabbed a knife, and then stomped towards the door, not hiding my presence anymore. Before I could even do anything, I heard him bolting down the stairs. Funny thing about the apartment door though, the door had 3 locks on it, 2 of which were broken and not used to actually lock the door. I guess the guy didn't notice the lock towards the bottom below the other 2 locks, which were bigger. So luck was on my side here. However, the story doesn't end here. A few months later, there is now scaffolding around the inner courtyard of the apartment building, where workers were now rebricking and repainting the facade of our side of the building. The scaffolding was so thorough that they were basically near up against the windows of the building. This will be important later. My mom and I had now moved downstairs to a newly renovated apartment, and it was now spring. One night, my mom looked out the window from our new kitchen and quickly killed the lights. I joined in quietly to see what was going on, and I see a cop with a flashlight looking around the courtyard, around the scaffolding, and I notice him picking up a wallet from the ground. He radios it in, and I swear, I could have sworn I saw the light from his flashlight show a splat of blood on the ground. I didn't know about this until the end of the year, but my Italian neighbor, who lived in this building since the 80s, and now lived across the hall from me, told me that some junkie used the scaffolding around my building to get to her window, and he was trying to break in. Thankfully her windows were locked, and she happened to be sleeping near that very window, so she caught him quickly. The guy tried to make a run for it, but ended up falling a good 20 to 30 feet onto hard concrete and limped away. He was found by police on the corner of my block, where he had died of his injuries. She and I both think that it was likely the same guy who tried to picklock my door just months before. The final story I'm going to share here happened during the spring of 2011, and this is one of the most horrifying experiences of my entire life. I was 17 years old at the time, and still in high school as a senior. I was hanging out with a girl with whom I was friends, with benefits at the time, and, well, long story, we hung around Coney Island for a bit, and then we went back to her apartment and did the deed. Aside from the sex, we were really close though. After we were done, she decided to walk me to the train station, which was the Bay 50th train station on the D line. This again will be very important later, as this train station is deep in a part of Gravesend, where there is blood and crip activity. Brooklyn. Anyway, she and I kissed each other goodbye, and we went our separate ways for the night. I walked up to the station, swiped my Metro card, and walked through the turnstiles. I see these 2 big black guys, and one of them intentionally bumps into me. Today, I would have just ignored it, but my dumb 17-year-old brain, still drunk on testosterone and dopamine from the earlier mentioned fuck session, made me yell, "Yo, what the fuck, man?" Mind you, I was 6'4" at the time, and these guys still towered over me. And I'm also white, in a mostly black neighborhood, which wasn't out of the ordinary for me since I'm originally from the Lower East Side in Manhattan. But that was likely why I was targeted. Maybe. After a short altercation, I just gave them the finger and went upstairs to the platform to get my train. For some reason, I decided to go to the darker southern edge of the platform, where it was dimly lit, so I could see the view of Coney Island and the parachute jump against the dying sunset. It was a beautiful sight to see, and I swear, I thank myself every day for going to see the view from part of the station I literally never stood at. Because of what happened next. I hear one of the guys coming up the stairs about 40 to 60 feet away yelling, "So you want to talk shit now, huh? Where you at?" I swiftly, but quietly, ran to hide behind a big garbage can from them, with the darkness of the night and the lack of lighting completely shielding me. What I saw, though, as I went to go hide, was what still gives me shivers and scares me to this day. The guy now had a fucking gun, and so did his friend. I'm atheist, but thank fucking God that they decided to check the opposite and more well-lit area of the station, the spot where I usually am while waiting for the train. Oh, fuck, I think to myself. They were going to rob me at the very least, but their tone sounded predatory. My fight-or-flight response is now screaming, leaning more towards flight because you don't fight unarmed against two armed guys. You just don't. My fear is almost quickly mixed with sadness due to the fact that I had lied to my mom about being at my high school, taking care of a few things with school. So I was thinking to myself, my mom is never going to find me, most likely. Same with my sister. They think I'm at school. Oh, shit. The guys are now almost at the other edge of the station, and I had to think fast. I couldn't run to the stairs and bolt out of the station because they would definitely hear me, and likely would chase me down. By some fucking massive stroke of luck, I could see the Coney Island-bound D train approaching the station, far into the distance, about 2 to 3 minutes away. However, I was on the Manhattan-bound side of the station, the opposite side from where the D train was coming. Cornered, with no rational solution left, I decided to go with the only irrational one I could think of. I decided on going down the tracks and climb over about 4 lanes worth of them, so I could get to the other platform across from where I was and onto the train that was arriving. One thing about this station, it's an elevated station, where the tracks are about 50 to 70 feet above the ground. And the tracks have an electrified third rail that can kill anything living that touches it. I don't know how I managed to climb over the tracks without falling to my death, tripping, touching the third rail, or even without getting caught by the armed thugs or the train workers nearby. But I managed to. And the train came just in time. I had escaped death by an inch, but I wasn't fully out of the woods yet. I was now heading towards Coney Island, the final stop on the D train, and opposite of where I'm supposed to go. I could have just stayed on the train and waited for it to go the other way, but I was scared that the guys would search the train for me. So I transferred to the N train and hightailed it back to my neighborhood. My parents still don't know about this nearly happening to me to this day. And I've never seen those guys again. It's really amazing what the human mind can do when you're really pushed and scared. When I told my friend about it a few months later, she thunder-slapped me, dead in the face. And honestly, I fully deserved it. I could have very easily gotten myself killed and caused my friends and family unbelievable pain. Take it from a New Yorker. Please don't get yourself killed over stupid shit. And always be aware. Stay safe, everybody.
Given my pretty busy schedule as a 17-year-old student, and the fact that I've had household duties to attend to, I don't always have the most flexible time to do everything, such that sometimes I have to compromise times when something arises. I'm not sure if this is important, but I am a male. I have a small shorkie named Abby, who I dearly love with all my heart. However, the fact she is only 2 years old and is always bouncing around the house means I have to take her out at least twice a day. She pees a lot on the rugs, and my parents scold me so that she can do dog stuff outside. This one particular day, I had to quickly go somewhere, ways off for a club event, so I had to take the bus because my parents could not drive me that day. It would be fun and all if the bus schedules would coordinate. Their schedules do not meet, and one of them came so late that I came home an hour late. At this time, it was already around 9 p.m., and I still had to finish chores up and do my homework. I figured that this in total would take around an hour to finish, so I put off walking Abby and getting straight to work. However, I was wrong. I practically finished by 11:30 p.m., and I was dead tired. However, Abby was whining and licking me profusely, so I had to go out to walk her. Getting her leash and my shoes, I went out and decided to make a few rounds around the neighborhood complex. I usually make my last day walk at around 10 anyways, and this has occurred where I walk her really late at night, so it does not bother me at all. Furthermore, there's usually nobody out at this time, because most of the people in my neighborhood are old people, and they are asleep. So at this time, I practically had my guard down and was just aimlessly walking Abby. Now my complex is like a square. I plan to make rounds around that. Imagine a square where the 4 lines are the major roads. My house is exactly nearby the bottom left corner. There is a major road near the uppermost line road, but other than that, it's just the small roads going through my complex. Within the square, there are small roads and alleyways that I came to know, which does come in useful when playing hide and seek with the neighborhood kids. One major factor that you have to know is that there are very little streetlights that illuminate the way. The major road is brightly lit, but there are only 2 in the other complex roads. My house is beside a rather well-maintained streetlight. This becomes important later. So anyways, I was walking Abby rather calmly, and without really being awake, I just walked like a zombie. I knew the way well, so it didn't become a bother for me. Everything went rather well, as I made my way up to the major road, and all the way to the rightmost road, when I noticed someone in front of me. It was a man wearing a hood and a cap, so basically clothes that seemed to conceal himself. I was wearing a blue jacket, jeans, and sneakers. The thing that surprised me the most was that the man was also walking a dog. It looked like a pit bull. I'm not great with identifying dog breeds, sorry, but it seemed kinda small to be one. Something you have to know about Abby is that she is a very sweet, dulcie, and she does not bark unless she senses something is wrong or just out of place. For example, she would bark when someone is behind the door. She rarely barks, so when she does, it becomes more alert. Anyways, I know most of the neighborhood dogs, as we are a pretty tight-knit community, and I would know their names and appearance, but I have never seen this dog, nor its owner. Now looking back, I should have just said hello and went on my way. But half-asleep me was not in the right mind. Abby obviously gravitated towards the dog, and they started playing and scratching, and yeah. While I was just dragging myself there, Abby literally, a few seconds later, started barking like crazy. She was growling and barking really loud. Okay, well, I was half asleep, but rest assured, I am sure it was quite loud, at the man. He suddenly pulled the pit bull away, and just went on his way. I was just like whatever, until I noticed that he was making glances at me, as he was shuffling his way out. I didn't really take notice, but I called out sorry as I tried to restrain Abby. After that, I went on my way. Now this is where I think I got a little creeped out. Remember how there are only so many streetlights? Well, most of them aren't maintained that well, so they only illuminate a small portion of the area. As I walked down the road, I suddenly had this feeling that I was being watched, but I brushed it off as just my imagination. As I went along, I went through the first streetlight and saw the same man just standing there, looking to the right. I thought I'd go up and apologize about Abby, but as I do, Abby starts going maniacal again, so I just went to the other side and waved at him. He then looked my way, and I swear I had the most chilled feeling go up my spine. I don't know how to describe it, but at that point, my instinct kicked in, and I ran. Guess what? He gave pursuit. I practically freaked the fuck out, and I just blindly ran. I'm a pretty fast runner, as I do cross country, but the season ended long ago, and I wasn't exactly in shape. But the adrenaline of that just gave me a huge speed boost, and I sprinted out of there. Abby runs fast as well, so it wasn't hard for her to run alongside me. At this point, I was in the bottom road and running towards my house. But after reading many stories here, The idea of not going to where my house is the best course of action. He was behind me, still running, but I was quite ahead. Instead of going to my house, I immediately turned right into a small playground, an alleyway, and went in there. I thought I was safe when I remembered Avi's collar makes a clinging sound whenever she walks, so I practically heard him turn and went towards my direction. Quickly thinking, I picked her up and ran towards an alleyway that led to the main road. This alleyway is notorious for having tall grass. Think Pokemon tall grass. But it didn't matter to me, because I was just too scared. I came to the main road, and immediately turned towards the left, most road, and out of breath. At this point, I was holding Avi in my left hand, and I took out my phone with my right hand to call someone, when I realized that it was dead. At this exact moment, I heard a dog barking and running. I knew it was him, because a few seconds later, he came behind me. I was really out of breath, and I felt like collapsing, but I ran anyways. And I'm not sure which thread it was in, but it said something like how it's best to start screaming and shouting like a madman to draw attention, which is what I started doing. I don't know who posted it, but you may as well save my life, because as I was near the end of the road, he was literally like several paces behind me. A car pulled up and a woman opened her window and started screaming at me. The man literally stopped and ran the opposite direction. Right at that moment, I was just on the ground, super exhausted, while Avi looked like she gave no shits about what just happened. While the woman, who happened to be my neighbor, who is a middle-aged woman who lives with her elderly mother, went out of the car and was like chewing me out for screaming. She said she was driving down the road when she heard screaming and saw me running, so she assumed I was some kind of escaped mental detainee, and when she saw it was me, she threatened to tell my parents. I apologized and explained to her what just happened, and she was just like, "Who? What the fuck?" and apologized for berating me. She then took me home and told my parents, and they got super worried and everything, and she's like, "That was very smart of you to start screaming to draw attention. Even though I might have disturbed the neighborhood, I think that really saved my hide." From that point on, I am now never going to walk Avi after 10 anymore. Creepy running man, let's not meet.
My story takes place in the spring of 2000. I had recently got my first puppy, a Pama mix, a very longed-for contribution to my life. I was 20, and had just moved into a dog-friendly apartment building, and I was enjoying the hell out of finally having a little pup in my life. I started walking him several times a day, and soon interacted with lots of new people, who also walked their dogs in the same place as I did. There were many really nice people that I got to know. And then there was Hugo. He was a 45-ish bloke with shaven head and a way of talking to you as if he was your best, oldest friend in the world. I didn't want to be rude and tell him to stay away. Not at first. But when I started getting texts from him without ever giving him my number, I told him to please leave me alone. He would inform me, as if it was perfectly normal, that he would sit and wonder if I was home, and drive by to check if my car was in the parking lot. If it wasn't, he admitted to feeling jealous and badly done by, wondering who I was with. I started avoiding the trails that I knew he often walked, and instead took my dog to a forest area outside the city, where we would play and run and have a great time. I started getting emails from Hugo, where he held long, one-sided conversations about why we made a perfect couple. I ignored the emails. Then I got letters, no stamp, in the mail, where he'd informed me about where he had seen me, what I had been wearing, and where my 4-year-old niece went to daycare. "She looks just like you." This is where I started to freak out a bit, and went to the police for support. The policeman informed me that even if this behavior was indeed disturbing, he had made no actual real threat, and therefore police could do nothing, apart from phoning him and telling him off. I figured they must have done because the texting and emailing stopped. Months went by and I forgot about the whole thing. Until one evening in the beginning of September, I was babysitting my niece and decided to take her and the dog to my favorite spot along the forest trail. There's a beach and a fire pot, and we could bring hot dogs and cocoa and have a nice evening outdoors. My niece was halfway into her second hot dog, and I was over by the riverside, throwing sticks into the water for my little dog to retrieve, when I suddenly realized that my niece was talking to someone, giggling and laughing. I turn around and see her sitting on the lap of Hugo. He is bouncing her around, and she laughs and smiles at him. I can't describe the feeling that came over me, but I heard myself say, "Put her down right now," and started walking towards him. I didn't run, as if afraid to spook him and cause him to run off with her. And I also didn't want to scare the child. He must have been watching me, following me without me noticing. I thought, sick bastard. "Such a pretty little princess," he said. "She's got your smile." "Come to me," I said to my niece. But then his grip around her tightened and she stopped giggling and looked at me with disbelief. My dog was now sensing that something had changed, that there was some sort of diffused threat in the air, and started to bark, dementedly. "Go play with the dog, princess, and your aunt and I will take a little walk," Hugo said to my niece, but his eyes were locked on me. "Isn't that right, darling?" he added, a thin veil covering an open threat. "Okay," the girl agreed, and he reached out a hand to me, grabbing hold of my arm before letting go of the child. "Go play," I said to her, trying to sound normal. "Go play with the dog, but stay clear of the water. I'll be right back." At this, he sniggered and yanked me with him down the trail. "So how come you're here this evening?" I asked, trying to sound casual and not scared out of my mind. "You told them I was a perv. You told the police I was a stalker. I'm just looking out for you, don't you see that? I do everything for you, and you're just an ungrateful, deceiving little bitch." "I didn't realize you were looking out for me," I said, unsure of how to handle the situation, waiting for an opportunity to run. Of course, if I wanted to make sure you didn't try to do anything stupid on our date, I would have taken the girl with us. See, I'm no monster. I'm your protector, your soulmate. So I let her be. I'm nice like that. At this, he stops in his tracks, turns around to face me, and lets go of my arm to touch my face. Before I knew what I was doing, I had shoved the heel of my hand directly on his trachea, the way we had practiced so many times during my conscription year, but never thought I would use in real life. Never hesitate. If you need to do this, then do it with all you got. There are no second chances, our instructor had said, and I had apparently paid better attention than I knew. To my surprise, Hugo went down on his knees, a stunned look on his face, and both hands clutching his throat. Run, I thought, run. I ran back to where I had left my niece and dog, snatched her up from the ground, and ran with the dog, barking by my side, back to the car. I threw the now crying child and the dog into the car and sped off. No seatbelts, no child seats, no nothing. I drove to the same police station that I had visited once before, and actually got to see the same policeman. They didn't find him where I'd left him, but retrieved my bag that had been left at the scene, as well as the dog lead and my niece's sunglasses. My niece had no idea that he wasn't a good guy, and no one could testify as to what had happened. He was never brought in, and I never got the ending I wanted. It took a long time until I stopped looking over my shoulder when out running, even longer before I could open my door when the doorbell rang, without first reaching for my pepper spray. I haven't seen or heard from him since that day. I hope we never meet again. Hey everyone, Hellfreezer here. And thank you very much for watching my collaboration with SLUMLOCKER. Thanks, of course, also goes to SLUMLOCKER for suggesting the idea. And I'd also encourage you to go over to his channel, have a look, maybe subscribe. He does have a very soothing voice. We also have a collaboration going up on his channel that you may like to check out. Well, it is rather late for me here when I'm recording this. It's about 5:30 in the morning. So I'm gonna run along now. Probably time I got some sleep, actually. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.